right. Hello, fourth grade friends. We're going to go over chapter 8, 9, and 10 homework. If you didn't get that done, I'm trusting you to have good integrity and to have your packet away for me for right now. Like away, like underneath your chair, okay? And then if you do have it, let's look over our work. And then we will read chapters 11, 12, and 13 today, okay? So, chapter 8, question number 1. Who do we meet in chapter 8? Who do we meet, Lily?
We meet Antonio, Salvatore, and Francesco.
We meet Antonio, Salvatore, and Francesco. Perfect. You need all three of those people, okay? Who in a different order? Order doesn't matter, as long as you have those three people. Good. How is their situation similar to Dominic's? Something that they are going through is a lot like Dominic's. What is a lot like Dominic's? Bennett? They're orphans too, right? What does that mean to be an orphan? We talked a little bit about this when we talked about immigration. Do you remember, Claire?
It's like you have no home.
You have maybe no home, but specifically you have no Kateri? No family, no parents, nobody to take care of you, right? Like you might have a little cousin, but can they take care of you?
No. We might have a little sister.
You might have a bigger brother, but unless they are an adult, then you're considered an orphan, right? An orphan is if you don't have parents or a guardian, okay? How would you describe the three Candiano boys? Let's start with who's the youngest? Antonio. How would you describe Antonio? How would you describe Antonio, Zach?
Dirty.
He's dirty, right? They were dirty. How else would you describe Antonio, that little one? How else, Amelia?
Funny.
He was kind of funny, wasn't he? He was like cracking jokes, and he was like, "What's with the sea monster?" And Francesco's like, "Sea monster?" What? Dominic. Too many Italian names in a row there. All right. So, anything else for Antonio that you think we need? Aiden?
Like curly hair.
He has curly hair. How else can you?
Yeah, he has blonde curls. It says that.
Yep. Antonio has the blonde curls. He's the little one. He's blonde. Brooke.
He's also kind of curious.
He's curious, right? Do you remember how old Antonio was? 7. So you might say 7 years old there too. Good. How else could you? Let's go. Who is the middle? Salvatore. How did you describe the Candiano boy? How did you describe Salvatore in that box? Monica?
That he had dark hair and dark eyes.
Dark hair and dark eyes. Good. Lily?
He is superstitious.
He's superstitious. What does that mean? Superstitious. Do you remember what that means? What does he do that's maybe superstitious? Remember, Bennett?
He thinks that the evil eye is on him.
Yeah, he thinks the evil eye is going to get Dominic, which is just like an evil spirit that's like attacking him and making him go crazy.
Wow.
What does he do that proves he's superstitious? What does Antonio do? Or what does he make the boys do? Do you remember, Rosie?
13 rocks. 13 stones. We either have to do something else, or we can put 13 stones in your pockets. We'll do this stuff.
Yeah, the 13 stones or rocks. Do you remember what the other one was? Do you remember, Zach?
You have to wait a
You have to wear a horn.
And they're like, oh, you have a horn, so we'll just fill your pockets.
So we'll just go. All right. So Antonio. So youngest one was Antonio is curious, right? Now we have Salvatore, and he's superstitious. Who's the oldest one? Kateri? Francesco. How would you describe Francesco then? So we have curious to superstitious. How would you describe Francesco, Amelia? Skeptical. What does that mean? Skeptical. What does that mean? Do you know, Nathan?
He doesn't really believe.
Yeah, he doesn't believe them. He's like, yeah, okay, sure, you're from the future. Okay, He's skeptical. How else could you describe Francesco? Alicia? He's the oldest, right? How old? Do you remember? It didn't exactly say how old he is, but do you remember? About as old as Dominic, so he is about 11, maybe 12, because remember, Dominic's in 5th grade, so he's about a year older than you guys. Okay. Anything else, Rosie?
stuff about their looks, but I said no shoes.
They have no shoes. That you can definitely go that way too for here. Yeah, because on the other page we talked more about the traits, right? So you can tell me what they look like here. Lily?
I thought he was a little bit confused because this like kid just pops up somewhere, so he's like,
It's kind of confused, right? Zach?
He's a boy.
He's a boy. Yep.
All boys.
Do you think we could say that these three boys are caring? They kind of start to take care of Dominic, right? They're bringing him along on the journey. They're like, we'll take. They're taking care of the goat. What did you think of Violetta? How many of you thought? Raise your hand if you thought Violetta was some sort of girl, like a girlfriend or a mom or a grandma or something like that.
wait, do you remember when the phone was like, maybe my foster family and then in Italy we had a goat.
Yep. Oh, Amelia. Amelia remembered back. She made a connection to earlier in the book when the old man was talking on the phone. He said, in Italy we had a goat.
Yeah, but it didn't say his name.
Her name was Violetta. No.
He just said, "Oh, beautiful Violetta."
Why do you think the author did that? Why did the author be like, "Oh, my sweet Violetta, my beautiful"? Why did the author do that? And then all of a sudden this goat comes charging out of nowhere.
And burped in his ear.
Why would the author want to do that to you? What did it kind of do to you, Alasia?
They tricked you by thinking it was like a girl or something, and it's actually a goat.
Yeah, they wanted to kind of make it funny to trick you and be like, ha, now there's a goat and it's burping in the boy's ear. Oh my gosh. All right, let's go on to chapter 9 then. Chapter 9 questions. What two things do the boys think may be wrong with Dominic? There are two things they think are wrong. What's one, Christian?
That he has the evil eye.
He has the evil eye, El Maluchio. He has the evil eye on him. What else did they think might have happened? Ryan?
Francesco thinks that the earthquake made him like weird.
Yeah, he thinks he was affected by the earthquake or the evil eye, or there's an evil spirit on him. Possessed evil spirit, so something like that. Zane? Kind of going off of Ryan's from the earthquake, right? That amnesia, but from the earthquake. Or an accident, there was something wrong, something happened. Okay. What year has Dominic traveled back to? What year is it now, Lizzie?
1902.
Not 1902. You're close. Claire? 1908. Good. 1908. Why do you think Dominic was taken back to this particular year? Why 1908? Why do you think it had to be that year? Why couldn't it have been 1907 or 1909? Why do you think that? What do you think, Monica?
Because Francesco Candiano lived at that time that he was kind of explaining it.
Yeah, so we're inferring that Francesco is the old man on the phone. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, that's not.
Okay, so he's the old man. And why would he want to come back to this time with Francesco Candiano? Because he was alive in 1907, right? He was alive in 1908. Why does it have to be 1908? Micah?
No, I didn't about him being on the phone. Was it typical? Because wasn't there like an old lady who was talking?
He went through a few phones, remember?
But this one was the one that.
This is the one that talked back to him. Yep. Yep. Rosie? Why does it have to be 1908? Think through what, Rosie? Yeah.
Okay.
The rows I have? Yeah.
Because I think this is the year where it announced it to Italy that you could go to Ellis Island.
So this is kind of, you think these boys are going to travel to Ellis Island then? I think you are right, because they don't just travel every year, right? They're going to start their journey soon. I bet you are right. Nathan?
And maybe because that year, because the same age as
They're the same age, right? So they have that same commonality. They're orphans. They're the same age. Claire?
Maybe the year where his brothers died.
His brothers die? So you think whose brothers are going to die? You think both brothers are going to die?
Yeah, so.
It did say that in the phone. You're right. So maybe this is a really important time for Dominic to come back to because the brothers are going to die. Maybe he's there to help Francesco in some way. Brooke?
I think this is kind of a wild guess or something like that, but I think that maybe Francesco actually might be a. Remember when Dominic said that his great grandfather was from Italy?
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe Francesco might be related to him somehow.
I get what you're thinking, but why is that a little bit off? Do you remember when he said about his grandfather was from Italy? Why was Dominic saying that? Do you remember?
Because it was a lie.
It was a lie. He wanted to fit in. So I like where you're going. Okay.
He might not.
He doesn't know.
So it could
Ooh.
be from Italy.
Rosie noticed Candiano and Cantori are really similar, but they're not the same. Okay, so that's kind of leading us on to Brooks a little bit more. Maybe they're related somehow. Zach?
I think 1908 was the day that Francesco went away,
What do you mean away?
like away from the town because there wasn't enough food.
So when he's gonna leave Avoletto.
So that might be why he's here.
That might be why Dominic's not here. Good. All right. I know there's a lot more we can do. We got 2 more questions to look over. In chapter 10s, what explanation does Dominic give for what's happening to him? So why is Dominic like, okay, this is happening? What does Dominic think? Do you remember, Kateri?
Like, this is a lot like what Francesco told me about. Like, what if he told me to travel back in time?
So does Dominic think he traveled back in time? No. What do you think, Claire?
I think that he thinks the old book and Francesco, he thinks he did it because, like, some part in the chapter was like, that old man did it.
So he thinks it's somehow the old man's fault. Maybe he did travel back in time, you could think. What else could you think, Lily?
I thought he said that he was like kept on saying his like you're not real. I'm just dreaming.
He kind of thinks this is just a dream, right? Like this can't happen. But I know Rosie commented on Maddie's comment thinking, because Maddie, you thought it was a dream too, right? That he was dreaming. But Rosie, you thought what?
I said that he tried to fall asleep.
Remember when he was like, all right, I'll close my eyes really, really tight and wish it.
But it's a dream, so he might be dreaming.
He's dreaming that he's dreaming. Dreamception. All right. What did you think about the quote? You live at the toe of the boot and you go crazy from the stink. What do they mean by the toe of the boot? Do you remember? What do they mean, Micah? Say it one more time. People's feet can stink. Why is this boot so important? What are they talking about? Are they talking about like a boot on your foot? No, what are they talking about with a boot? Bennett?
The place looks like a boot, and they think he lives at the toe.
Yeah, in Italy, remember that map at the very back of your book, friends? If you want to turn with me towards the very back, there's the picture of Italy. And they think he is from that Reggio di Calabria, right at that little tip. And it kind of looks like a toe, like the heel is on the backside, and the tip right there is the toe of the boot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do you see how it looks more like a big long boot now? Almost like a tall boot. Okay,
Actually looks a lot like a boot.
okay. Rosie?
On the front, it does say it's Orphan of Ellis Island, a time travel adventure.
A time travel adventure.
That's why I was inferring that it was going to be time travel.
That is a great inference, and Kateri, I think that helps with yours too, and using what you know about the cover too to help you. Good. And read down on the very bottom of the cover. What's that last sentence say?
Yeah, I just.
So he probably is actually somehow time traveling. Remember, is this a true story, friends?
No.
No. So time travel is allowed because it's fiction.
Like
There's parts that are based off of history, right? Like people going to Ellis Island. But not everything in here is factual. Not everything's true. Thomas?
I would have one part that it is time travel. On the cover, I infer that it's time travel because the boy it looks like what inscribed him. Also, he has a T-Rex shirt on.
Yeah, so we can infer that the boy on the cover is Dominic, right? Because he's wearing that T-Rex shirt. Kateri?
It also says, under the orphan of Ellis, there's a time travel adventure.
Yup.
Yeah, just like
Zane?
yeah.
It's a historical fiction.
It's kind of a, we talked about that, the historical fiction. Good memory.
Oh, and it says, will Dominic ever return?
Will he ever return? Good. Do you think he'll return from the past?
Yeah.
I hope so. I don't know. Would you guys like to be stuck in 1908? No, you don't have electricity like this everywhere. You had to either walk or ride in a horse and carriage if you were lucky enough. You couldn't really bike. Bikes weren't that popular. Oh my goodness. All right, fourth grade friends. Holy moly. All right, what we are going to do now, today we are going to just read our chapter 11, 12, and 13. I do have some questions that I'll ask as we go through, okay? And then we will talk about what your homework is going to look like. It'll be for tomorrow, but I'll give you the choice if you want to start it tonight. So go ahead and get your books open, okay?
Already got it open.
To chapter 11. 11. Yeah.
Will we get bookmarks?
Would you guys like bookmarks?
Yeah.
I can work on that. Give me at least a day, okay? All right, so we last left, and Dominic is really confused by these boys who are putting pebbles in his pocket, right? How did he get to 1908? So let's jump in and read about what's going to happen next to him. Chapter 11. With another graceful tilt of her head, Violetta nibbled on the shoulder of Dominic's t-shirt and let out a bleat and a burp. Do you know what a bleat is? It's the sound goats make where they kind of go like, bah, almost like a bat, like a sheep. Bah. She burped again, Dominic exclaimed. It's one of her many talents, Francesco bragged. It's her sign of contentment. Oh, Francesco, why must you always play the poet? Salvatore groaned. Why can't you just say your goat burps? Does Salvatore really like how Francesco talks? No, he's like, why are you the poet? Why are you trying to be so fancy with all of this? Just say, my goat can burp, and move on. Anyone can see she's a very contented goat, Francesco replied. I'd be contented too if I could eat anything in sight, Salvatore said. Francesco buried his face in Violetta's neck. She's as gentle as a lamb, and quite musical too, eh? Dominic nodded and reached out to pet Violetta's neck. Between her bleeding and her burping, she really did sound musical. He thought about all the pets he had dreamed of having, but he'd never dreamed of a pet goat. I pray to St. Francis every day to keep her healthy, Francesco continued. St. Francis? Dominic asked. What do we think he's talking about? St. Francis. Who would he be praying to? St. Francis who? Of Assisi. Good. Why would he want to pray to St. Francis of Assisi?
He's the patron saint of animals.
Patron saint of animals. Good. Yes, Francesco nodded. Father Tommaso says that St. Francis of Assisi loved animals so much that when he talked to them, they answered. Because of this miracle, he is the patron saint of animals everywhere. Isn't that right, Violetta? Violetta tilted her head, yawned a big yawn, and then began to nibble again on Dominic's t-shirt. Even if a miracle was visited on her, Violetta wouldn't talk, Salvatore joked. She'd be too busy eating. Violetta's tug at the hem of the shirt tickled Dominic. One day, St. Francis may decide to bless Violetta with a miracle, Francesco declared. And then won't you be sorry, Salvatore, for mocking her so? Hey, she really is hungry, Dominic cried. The boys all laughed as Dominic tugged his shirt away from Violetta's teeth. She does try to eat anything in sight, Francesco admitted, sitting down on a moss-covered rock. But I think she likes you. We're on page 45, Amelia. I like you too, Dominic whispered as Violetta nuzzled against his leg. There's no better pet in the world, Francesco remarked. I always wanted a sheepdog, Dominic said, thinking of his dream family. A dog? Francesco scoffed. How could you say such a thing? A dog could never be as smart as Violetta. And you couldn't get a drink from a dog, Antonio pointed out. A drink? Dominic watched Antonio squeeze underneath Violetta's belly. Antonio, where are your manners? Francesco scolded, grabbing hold of his little brother's shirt. Guests go first. Dominic's eyes grew wide as he realized that Francesco was talking about drinking from the goat. No, that's all right, Dominic assured them. I can wait, really. I can wait for a can of soda from a soda machine or a glass of normal cow's milk from the refrigerator, he thought. Then he realized that if this really was the year 1908, such things as modern refrigerators and soda machines hadn't even been invented yet. Francesco let go of Antonio's shirt. As the bright sun beat down on his head, Dominic gulped. Now that he thought about it, he found that his mouth was dry and his throat was parched. He watched as Francesco began to squeeze one of Violetta's long pinkish teats. Soon a thin stream of milk came squirting out, and Antonio was quick to catch it in his mouth. Notice the author used that word, long pinkish teats. That's not a word you see a lot in reading.
Nope.
What can we infer teats might be then? Use the next sentence to help you. Soon a thin stream of milk came squirting out, and Antonio was quick to catch it in his mouth. What do you think a teat could be then? Brooke?
It's like the underpart of the cow or a goat.
Yep. It's kind of like the udder, but specifically it's the little, like, almost like pointy parts that you would squeeze to get the milk out of. Yep.
Yeah.
So goats have those too. Did you know you actually can buy, like, goat milk and goat cheese at the store and stuff? Goat cheese is more common to find at the grocery store, but you can get goat milk and drink it like you would a glass of cow's milk. Kind of crazy. It's a little bit, from what I understand, a little, like, almost saltier, right? Okay, so kind of like a salty milk almost. Would you want to drink out of Violetta's? No. Straight out of it. Yep. Not even like into like goes through all the processes like our milk does. It's just straight out of the goat into your mouth. It'd be really fresh though, wouldn't it? If you're starving, right?
I know.
So Dominic licked his lips and wondered just what goat milk tasted like. Salvatore threw off the heavy netting from his shoulder and crouched down beside Violetta for his turn. Why do you carry that with you? Dominic asked, trying to get his mind off his thirst. We worked for the Padrone picking lemons last week, and he paid us in trade, Salvatore explained, wiping the milk from his mouth. The Padrone? Padrone Pirozzi owns what's left of the lemon trees there, Francesco said, pointing to the orchard below them. In the bright morning light, Dominic could see the lemon trees clinging to the hillside. He took a deep breath, and the faint fragrance of lemons tickled his nose. Since the blight killed off many of the trees, the workers have all gone and the Padrone has no one to pick the fruits that's left, Salvatore continued. We picked him 40 bushels yesterday, and all we got was this old net full of holes, Francesco grumbled. I think I can mend it, if I can get a big enough needle, Salvatore declared, spreading the net on the ground. Violetta was quick to begin nibbling on its worn edges. Will you stop? Salvatore shouted angrily, pulling her away. Salvatore, why must you always lose that temper of yours? Francesco sighed. Oh, and what would you have me do? Salvatore retorted. I should smile as she chews up a day's work. Violetta is an intelligent animal, Francesco reminded him. You don't need to shout for her to understand you. Violetta lost interest in the net and began to turn her attention to the fringe on Salvatore's shorts. I wish I could eat anything like Violetta, Antonio complained. My stomach is so empty that it hurts all the time. Dominic suddenly thought of his own stomach and of how hungry he had become. Don't complain, Antonio, scolded Francesco. You just had a drink of milk. Be thankful for that. But I'm still hungry, Antonio moaned. Can we roast the birds now? No, we will wait until we can get 2 more. They're so small, there's hardly a mouthful here for one of us, Francesco decided. Dominic thought about the foster families he stayed with and how he didn't always like the meals they made. He thought about all the times he had gone to bed hungry rather than try some of their strange-looking chili or tuna casserole. Now he would gladly have eaten any of those. What about the family you stay with? Dominic asked. Don't you like the food they give you? We don't have a family to stay with, Francesco explained. We sleep in a hayloft in one of the Padrone's barns. It's a good dry place to sleep. Father Tommaso gives us bread once a week, and once a month we get some pork or beef. The rest of the time, we must find food wherever we can. Father Tommaso looks after the orphans in these hills, Salvatore added, and he has even found some of them families in America. Dominic felt his heart leap at the mention of America. Father Tommaso has promised to find us such a family one day, Antonio piped in. Have you ever had a family to stay with? Dominic squirmed. He wasn't used to talking about himself. Sure, he replied. I've had lots of families. The other boys grew quiet on hearing this. From the looks on the brothers' faces, Dominic could tell they were impressed, and he didn't want this moment of being envied to end. Did these families feed you? Antonio asked. Dominic nodded. Where are they now? Salvatore demanded. Are they looking for other children? Are they down south in Calabria? Dominic struggled to fight back his tears. It was all so confusing. He wanted so much to tell them the truth, but how could they understand? I'm not from Calabria, he began. My home, where I come from, it's far away. He stammered. It's across the ocean. It's across time, too. I know you won't believe me, but I was born in America. It's where I live. It's where I got my shirt. I live in the future, about 100 years from now. So what time is Dominic from then? Around 2008, so still a little older than us. The three Candiano brothers stared at him wide-eyed. Antonio's mouth had dropped open, and the only thing to break their stunned silence were the sounds of Violetta chewing and bleating and singing her song of contentment.
That's a suffix.
It does have that suffix of meant, contentment. Good. Chapter 12. Francesco sighed. You are more confused than I thought. It's like I told you about this old man and his dream, Dominic tried to explain. Oh no, Francesco interrupted. We're back to the dream, hey? Well, all right. If you are, as you say, in a dream, why not relax? Soon you'll wake up and everything will be as it was. So there's really nothing to worry about, is there? Well, Dominic hesitated, I guess. Suddenly, Dominic's worries were interrupted. Ciao, Francesco! Hello! A young girl's voice called from the distance. Dominic and the others turned to see a dark-haired girl in a dirty, raggedy dress running toward them, followed by a small flock of sheep. Ciao, Nina! Francesco called his greeting back to her. I've been looking all over for you, the girl exclaimed as she ran up to them. Her face was flushed and bits of raw wool stuck to her long, dark braids. What's the matter, Nina? Did you miss Francesco? Salvatore teased. Francesco blushed at this remark. What can you kind of infer there? You think Francesco likes Nina? Yeah, I think so too. It's not me who wants to see you, the girl scoffed. It's Father Tommaso. He has been looking everywhere for you. He says that you're to come at once. She turned to look at Dominic. Who's your friend? She asked with a smile. And why is he dressed so strangely? Il Malachio is on him, Salvatore whispered dramatically. And that demon he wears on his shirt will put the evil eye on you if you look at it. On hearing this, Nina's smile faded and she took a step backward. Don't listen to Salvatore, Francesco told her. He went on to explain about the earthquake and how confused Dominic was. Nina listened. Then she reached into the cloth pouch that hung from her waist and pulled something out. She offered it to Dominic. Mangia, Nina coaxed. Eat. She unwrapped the grape leaves that covered a small piece of cheese. From my sheep, Nina told him as she nodded to the ewe standing beside her. Dominic took a bite of the cheese. It was the first food he had eaten since the day before, and even though the cheese was sharper and more pungent than the American cheese he was used to eating, Dominic was glad to have something to put in his empty stomach. Antonio was quick to ask for a piece, and Salvatore followed. How is your baby doing? Francesco asked as a little black and white lamb nuzzled against Nina's leg. Nina's face broke into a smile. She knelt down beside the lamb, and he licked her cheek. My little Galileo. Do you see how strong his legs are? He can outrun some of the older ewes already. Dominic could see how proud Nina was of her lamb. He reached out to pet Galileo's soft, woolly back and was suddenly reminded of how much he wanted a pet of his own to be proud of and to take care of. I have to get my sheep to the pasture, Nina said as she stood up. And don't forget to stop in to see Father Tommaso. He said it was urgent. Francesco shook his head. We're on our way there now, he promised, waving goodbye to her. Buongiorno, Nina. Good day, the boys called after her. We will take you with us to see Father Tommaso, Francesco told Dominic. He is the most beloved priest around here. If there is a way to help you, Father Tommaso will find it. He put his arm around Dominic. You can come along with us. What do you say? Okay, Dominic mumbled, pulling away from Francesco. He didn't know if he'd ever get used to all the touching, but he was glad for their company. As he followed behind them, Dominic couldn't take his eyes off the countryside. Having grown up in the city, Dominic was used to city streets, the noise of traffic, doors slamming, people shouting, and the bus fumes lingering about the street corners. Here he found himself surrounded by the gentle curves of the green hills, the sound of birds overhead, and the earthy scents of lemon and herbs in the air. So how would you describe what Dominic's used to compared to what is happening right now? How would you describe between those two? What do you think, Lizzie?
Where Dominic comes from, there's like busy places. There's like no quiet. It's always like honking or
It's
loud noises, and then it's so quiet here. There's a lot of open space.
Yeah, so going off of that, I think I heard Monica kind of start to say, what were you thinking?
I said urban and then rural.
Rural. Yep. So he's used to that urban, the loud, noisy, and now he's in that rural, that like countryside where there's not a lot going on. Huh? Shh. Listen, said Salvatore, coming to a sudden stop. Dominic stopped and listened along with the others. He could just make out the faint tinkling of bells in the distance. Donkey bells, Salvatore whispered. That's most likely Dominica, Randizzi's donkey. We saw them yesterday carrying stones up for the Padrone's new wine house. The orchard is empty. Who is Randizzi? Dominic asked. He's the giant who works for the Padrone. He's in charge of this hillside, Francesco told him. He is bigger than 3 men, Salvatore added, with a heart no bigger than a thumbnail. What is he trying to say? What's Salvatore trying to say about Randizzi? He's bigger than 3 men, with a heart no bigger than a thumbnail.
He's not very good.
Really care.
He's not very kind. He doesn't really care, right? So he's this huge guy, and show me how big his heart is. Yep. Not little big. Not very big. It's almost like the Grinch's one when it shrinks down, right? Picture that in your head. It's that super teeny tiny one. Anyone caught stealing fruit or hunting on the land must answer to his whip. Whip? Dominic gulped. He dips it in lye, Antonio whispered, so as to leave his mark for good. Show him the scar, Salvatore. Lily?
What's it said it dips in lye.
Dips in lye. It's kind of like a liquid that when you have a cut open, it burns it. So he whips you, and then the lye on the rope sinks in and like stings more.
It's like salt, but
It's kind of like a salty poisonish. Like it's not good. It really hurts the burn, and it leaves the scars a lot sharper. Like you can see that they have a scar. Whereas like you think if you ever had a cut, does it heal pretty nicely? You can tell a little bit you had a cut. Whereas with this, you can really tell where they got whipped because the lye doesn't let it like heal all the way. Yeah? And it's like a whip like they whipped Jesus with, those big long like leather whips. So Salvatore turned around and pulled up his shirt. So he pulls up his shirt. Dominic winced at the sight of the long, thin scar that stripped to Salvatore's back. Don't worry, Francesco said on seeing Dominic's anxious face. We won't be meeting Randizzi's whip today. Look for yourself. It's as Salvatore said. The orchard is empty. Dominic followed his gaze to see a small orchard at the end of the path. 3 large trees were covered in deep ruby red cherries, and the air held the heady scent of their fruit. Come on, Francesco called as he and Violetta took off at a trot. Salvatore quickly threw off the heavy net from his shoulder and began to climb one of the trees. Dominic had never stolen anything before, and the idea of stealing from a giant with a whip made his stomach more than a little queasy. But it was his almost empty stomach that gave him the courage he needed now. He had not eaten anything since breakfast the day before in New York, and the little bit of cheese that Nina had given him hadn't made a dent in his mounting hunger. He watched as Francesco took the birds off his belt and slung them over a low branch of a tree. Dominic knew that, as hungry as he wouldn't be able to eat those little birds. He decided instead to eat as many cherries as he could. He watched Antonio shinny up the tree behind Salvatore. Together, the two boys threw the cherries down, and soon they all sat under the tree, filling their empty bellies with the delicious sweet fruit. Francesco, can we roast the birds now? I'm still hungry, Antonio whined. Shame on you, Antonio, Francesco scolded. You are never satisfied. No, we'll save the birds for our evening meal. So what is Francesco kind of doing for Antonio? Like, how would you describe their relationship? What is Francesco more like? He's almost more like a parent, right? Like a dad to them instead of his bigger brother. Why do you think Francesco has to do that? Why is Francesco? Ryan?
He's like the older.
He's the oldest one, right? So he's like, I'm kind of the one in charge since we don't have parents. Don't worry, Antonio, Salvatore told him. I heard yesterday that Signor Falcone, the baker, has a rat problem in his shop again. He'll trade bread and biscotti for every rat we catch. I'm going to try to catch some rats. Maybe I'll be lucky. Dominic remembered the long, hard cookies called biscotti from the Italian bakery in one of his old neighborhoods. He wanted to hear more about the rats and the biscotti, but Antonio had spit a cherry pit so far that it hit a tree a good distance away. I'll bet you can't top that, Antonio bragged. Francesco and Dominic were quick to try, and soon they had a pit-spitting contest with everyone taking part but Salvatore. Salvatore, how many times must I tell you not to swallow the pits? Francesco scolded. What's wrong with the pits? His brother retorted. At least they fill me up. You're going to end up with one taking root in your stomach, Francesco told him. Is that really true? No, but is it good to eat the pits of a cherry?
No, you can like if you might choke on
You could choke on them, or can your stomach really digest them?
No.
No, it's not really good for you, okay? It really hurts your stomach. So Salvatore's going to have a tree growing out of his nose? Antonio giggled as he pulled an imaginary tree from Salvatore's nose. Salvatore gave him a gentle shove, and Antonio shoved back, and soon all the boys were wrestling on the ground like frisky puppies. Antonio stopped suddenly when he saw a stub of bread fall out of Salvatore's pocket. Where did you get that? Antonio asked. Salvatore shrugged. I found it by the well. And you told no one about it? Francesco's voice was stern. I forgot, Salvatore said weakly. Give it to me, Francesco ordered. His brother was quick to hand over the bread. How many times must I tell you, Francesco, sighed, pulling the bread apart. We are familia. We are family. And as a family, we share all we have. We may not have much, but if we forget each other, then we have nothing. Do you understand? Why do you think Salvatore wanted to keep the bread a secret? So he could eat it himself, right? Because he's like, at least the cherry pits fell out my stomach. Now he's like, I have this bread. But is it just his anymore? No. Why is it not just his? Lily?
Because he's gonna share it with all his
Yeah.
friends and family.
They're family, right? They share everything. Like Salvatore said. No. Like Francesco said, if we don't share with each other, we have nothing. Salvatore's eyes welled up with tears, ashamed at having his own greed exposed before the little group. Francesco passed out the pieces of bread, which the boys quickly devoured. Dominic was glad that Francesco had included him. It was only a mouthful, but it satisfied more than his hunger. It felt wonderful to be included in their family. As Dominic popped another cherry into his mouth, his thoughts drifted back to his own time. He thought about how poor he often felt with his shabby clothes and old sneakers, but he realized that he had never been as poor as these boys. He was never so hungry that he had to kill birds for his supper. He never had to steal in order to eat. He never had to trap a rat to get a cookie. And he never had to fill his stomach with cherry pits because there was nothing else to fill it. Dominic suddenly realized just how desperate these boys were for food. But at the same time, being with the three raggedly dressed brothers who considered him family made him feel richer than he had ever felt before. When they finished eating the cherries, Francesco called for a song. "Antonio," he ordered, "play us something on the concertina." Antonio picked up the little wooden instrument, and soon the air was filled with a cheerful melody. Listening to Antonio's gentle tune against the sound of the wind in the trees, Dominic thought of how different the sounds were back at home. The music he liked listening to had come only out of his Walkman, or a television, or a stereo. Do you know what a Walkman is?
Yeah, it's like you can play music.
It's almost like not even a CD player. It's what's called cassette tapes. So it's like a rectangle, but you could only have 12 songs ish on them, right, Minu? It's like the old before an iPad or a iPod, but you could only have 12 songs at once.
What's Spotify?
Way before Spotify. Way before. And the sounds outdoors were of cars and buses speeding by, boomboxes blasting on the sidewalk, grinding screeches of the subway, and noisy jet planes crisscrossing through the skies overhead. But here in this place and time, in the Italy of 1908, there were no such sounds. Here Dominic listened along with the others to the tinkle of donkey bells in the distance, the sweet notes from Antonio's concertina, and the rustling of the olive leaves in the wind. There was a calmness to this place, a gentleness that seemed so different from the modern city life he had always known. "Hey, Tullio," a voice suddenly shouted. "Do you smell the armpit of an orphan gypsy?" What do you think that means?
Are we gonna reach over
It's a giant.
Smell that. Do you think this person's really kind? No. What are they trying to do to them, do you think? Make fun of them. Give them insults, right? Let's read and see who's talking about the armpit of an orphan gypsy. This will be our last chapter for today. "San Gennaro pensaki tu. Saint Gerano, protect us," Francesco whispered as he crossed himself. What do you mean? What did the author mean by crossed himself, do you think? Sign of the cross. Yep, he's praying to a saint, so he's blessing himself. Then he and the others turned to see 4 boys swaggering toward them down the path. One of the boys carried a piglet. "Who are they?" Dominic whispered as the boys drew closer. "The one with the piglet in his arms is Sausage Pirozzi," Francesco said, hurrying to his feet. "He is the son of the padrone. Because he can afford to eat so much sausage, he does. And so he has ended up looking like one." So is his name really Sausage? No, they just kind of are making fun of how rich and what good food he eats. So imagine that. This boy's name is Sausage because he can eat so much sausage. And then you have a Salvatore who is eating cherry pits. Very different lives, right? Very different. "He always carries that piglet around to show how rich he is," Salvatore added as he collected his net. "He and his cousin Tullio, the one he's with, think they're better than the rest of us because they eat meat every week." How often do the Candiano boys eat meat?
Once a month.
Once a month. So the other boys are eating it almost 3 times more. Once the Sausage gets to eat it once a week. All the other boys are usually once a month.
Because
The priest gives them the bread and the meat. Yep. But for Sausage, where does he get all of his food from, do you think? His dad, the padrone. Yep. "Ugh, what's that smell?" Sausage called out. "I smell moldy barnyard straw," Tullio retorted. Salvatore took a step forward, his face crimson with anger, but Francesco was quick to pull him back. Remember, what did we learn about Salvatore last chapter? Lily?
It's easy for him to lose.
It's easy for him to lose his temper. Would this be a good person to lose his temper on? Why would this not be a good person to lose his temper on? He could tell his father, and then Randizzi might come with the whip, right? "Ignore them," Francesco whispered in his ear. "Remember what Father Tommaso told us. Turn your other cheek. You know how Father says that it takes more strength not to fight than to fight." "Stealing fruit again from my papa's orchard?" Sausage asked, clicking his tongue while giving his piglet a squeeze. "I think maybe I should send for Signor Randizzi. Do you suppose that's what I should do?" "It was only a few cherries," Francesco trying to reason with him. We won't take any more. Once a thief, always a thief. It is how you are made, Sausage retorted. Hey, Sausage, tu sei un fungo. You are made like a mushroom, Salvatore replied. Nello, Sausage shouted to a younger boy beside him. Go and fetch Signor Randizzi. Tell him we have visitors in our orchard. Too bad we'll have to miss him, Francesco said with a nervous smile. We were just leaving. He whistled for Violetta and took Antonio by his hand. Salvatore, grab the birds, he whispered. Why do you think Francesco's in such a hurry now? The Giants coming, right? We're gonna miss him. We gotta go. Salvatore picked up the canaries, and Dominic followed behind them as they began walking toward the path. But Sausage and his group had spread out, blocking their way. Hold your noses, everyone, Sausage taunted. There's a bad stink in the air. And look, they found another bad smell to join them. What do you think that other bad smell is, Dominic? Dominic stood frozen, expressionless. Look at that suffix. The way he always did when the kids taunted him. I'd rather smell old Giuseppina's donkey stall, Sausage said, holding his nose. Tullio and the others laughed at this. It is you who smell sausage, Salvatore shouted back. With all that fish oil you rub on those old shoes of yours, everyone can smell you before you come into sight. At least I own a pair of shoes all to myself, Sausage retorted. Maybe you should try some fish oil yourselves, shouted Tullio. It might help to cover up the stink. Or maybe this will do. With that, he reached down to the ground, picked up a dried clump of manure, and threw it their way. Two other boys in their group followed Tullio's lead and armed themselves with stones for ammunition. Ignore them, Francesco ordered as they took shelter behind a tree. But on hearing another slur, Salvatore spun around and threw a clod of manure, just missing Tullio's arm. As a large stone flew through the air, Salvatore tried to return the fire, only to miss his mark once more. Salvatore! Francesco shouted. How many times must I tell you? I know, Salvatore yelled, throwing another clod. Aim for the other cheek! Turn the other cheek! Francesco cried, pulling Antonio behind a bush. Not aim for it! Oh, that's funny. Dominic ducked down low with the others as another cloud of manure flew through over their heads. Suddenly, the sound of donkey bells could be heard coming up the path. Oh no, it's Domenica, Antonio gasped. We must leave now, Francesco exclaimed. But they blocked the path, Salvatore cried. Then we'll just have to make a run for it through the orchard, Francesco shouted. Quick, they're getting away, Sausage yelled as Salvatore and Francesco ran in the other direction. Dominic and Antonio followed behind them. With Violetta at their side and a barge of stones at their back, the boys raced through the orchard, running as fast as their feet could take them. Run, Francesco cried. And run they did. They ran straight into the trap set for them, straight into the path of the giant Randizzi. Stop there! A thunderous voice bellowed as Dominic felt his knees begin to buckle. Oh, man. Would you be scared to see Randizzi standing there? So imagine this Randizzi is like, so Mr. Leach is like this tall, right? It's like 1.5 Mr. Leaches. So like Mr. Leach standing almost on top of Mr. Leach's own shoulders, and he's wide. It's almost like Hagrid coming at you, but not a nice Hagrid. Not a nice. Hagrid's from Harry Potter. I just know a lot of you have seen Harry Potter. Okay, but this guy is not nice. Remember, his heart is as big as a thumbnail. Oh my goodness. Do you think they're going to make it out okay? I feel like something's going to happen. Alright. Oh my. They do call him Sausage. That was kind of funny, wasn't it? Do you think he deserves his nickname, though? Yes. He's not very nice, right? And he eats too much sausage. So if you picture him, you kind of picture somebody who's a little bit bigger around, right? Kateri? Ba-ba-da-ba-bum. Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, but it said like EWE.
EWE and ew. That's another name for like a sheep. It's like a different type of sheep. An ew. Yep. All right, so fourth grade friends, in your packet, you have the next page that says chapter 11 through 13 classwork. We're going to do that tomorrow. Okay. Then if you turn to the next page, there will be your homework. Okay. It's on 2 pages, front and back. You don't have to start it, but you will have it for tomorrow. So if you want to get a head start on it, because it's 2 pages, 11, 12, and 13, those 2 pages, you can get a head start on, but you don't have to yet. That'll be tomorrow's homework, okay? And that is all we had for reading today. Bye.